Hi there, Chris here, and welcome to week 3 of my Feel It in Your Bones Quilt-Along. This week we're going to be creating the eyes that go on all the different skulls to give them their different emotions. This is step number 5 in the pattern. First up is love. For the love eyes, you will need 4 piece M of the background, 1 piece L6, 4 piece L8, and 8 piece L9. On the background M pieces, we are basically going to snowball the corners. On all 4 pieces, on one of these short ends, we will use 2 of those L9 pieces. And if you like, you can draw that line from corner to corner, but since these are small pieces and I have a seam guide on my machine bed, I won't worry about that. And then on the opposite short end, on 2 of them, you are going to place a piece L8 in the lower left-hand corner. And on the other 2, you'll place it in the lower right-hand corner. Those pieces are a little larger, so I'm going to draw that line also to make sure that I get these in the correct orientation. And to help me move these from my cutting table to my sewing machine, I will just put a pin in those large squares just to make sure they stay where they're supposed to be. Now we can take these over to the sewing machine. Now we can trim our seam allowances to 1/4 inch. And now we can press those. All right, those are pressed. So now we're going to pair up to make hearts. So the 2 large snowballed corners should be opposite each other. And we're just going to stitch 1/4 inch straight down that middle seam. Now we have our 2 eyes, and then we will take that L6 piece and join it in the middle. And there are Love's eyes. So now we'll set these aside and move on to Gloom. All right, up next is Gloom. Now for Gloom, out of the background, we will need 2 piece F, 1 piece O, and 2 piece P. From the blue, we will need 1 G6, 2 G8, 4 G9, and 1 G10. We are going to start with piece O and piece G10 and make 2 half square triangles. So we will start by putting them right sides together. And on the back side of one of the pieces, whichever is lighter or easier to see, we're going to draw a line from corner to corner diagonally. Now we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew 1/4 inch away from that line on both sides. And now we're going to cut right along that line that we drew. That's going to give us 2 half square triangles. So now I'm going to go press those. And now we need to trim these down to 4.5 inches. If you have a 4.5 inch acrylic template, that would be ideal. But I have my 6.5 inch and I'll show you how to use that to trim any size square smaller than 6.5 inches. We'll start with this one. This template has diagonal lines on the 45 degrees, so I'm going to line that up on the seam. And on my first cut, I'm going to trim just barely any fabric away. And now I'll flip this around, and I'll again line up that 45-degree angle, but I'm also going to line up the 4.5 inch mark over here. Now I'm left-handed, and this is made for a right-handed person, but if you count, you can find that this is 4.5 inches right there. And once you have your diagonal line, as well as both of your 4.5 inch marks lined up, you can go ahead and trim the rest. And now we have a perfect 4.5 inch half square triangle. And we will do the same with the other one. There we go. Next, we're going to take those 2 F pieces and 2 of the G9 pieces, and we are going to snowball 2 of the corners, and we need them to be opposite of each other. There are pictures in the pattern to help you with this as well. So we're going to sew a diagonal line from this corner to this corner, and from this corner to this corner. And now we can trim and press. Now for the 2 P pieces, we will take 2 of those G9 squares, and we're going to place them opposite corners, like that. And then we'll take the 2 G8 squares and place them along the same long edge in the other corner. And we're going to sew a line from corner to corner on all of these squares. So we're snowballing these bottom corners. And now we can trim and press those. And there are those. And now we can assemble the eyes. So we'll take those P units, place them on the bottom. Those half square triangles that we created go on the outer edges. And then those F pieces on the inner edges. So we'll start by sewing the half square triangles to the F pieces. And now we can sew the lower half to the upper half. And now with both of those eyes created, we can add the G6 in between them. And there's the eyes for gloom. So we'll set those aside. And up next is Doom. So for Doom, out of the background, you will need 1 J square, 2 N rectangles, and 2 Q squares. And then from our red color, we'll be using 2 D3 rectangles, 1 D4 square. We have our D6 strip, 2 D8, and 2 D9. We will start with the 2 Q squares, and we're going to snowball the corners just like we did with Gloom. So along the bottom edge, the 2 outside corners will get the large D8 square, and the 2 inside corners will get the smaller D9 square. And we're just going to sew from corner to corner. And now we trim and press. And there we go. Set those aside. And now we need to make half rectangle triangles. So we will use the N background pieces and the D3 pieces. If you purchased a kit or just purchased my HRT trim template, I'm going to show you how to use that. So we need to start by flipping all of these pieces over. And we need to make a mark 1/2 inch in from the side and the top, and the side and the bottom on all 4 pieces. On the trim template, there are squares in all 4 corners. Those are 1/2 inch from the edge. So you can line up that square with the corner and then just make 2 little marks to mark that. So on 2 of the pieces, we will need the upper left and lower right corners marked, like I'm doing here. And then on the other two pieces, we need opposites. So we need the upper right and lower left. Now this template is not quite long enough, so I am going to grab my regular ruler. What we need to do is connect those 2 points. We are not connecting the corners of the fabric. So I'll just line up my ruler so it's got the 2 points that we just made and draw a line all the way from edge to edge. It's going to be offset. That's what we want. And you only need to mark the backside of one of each set. So whichever one is lighter or easier to see your marks on, choose that one. And now we're going to use some straight pins to help us get those aligned. So I usually start with the piece that has the line on it. Take my straight pin, put it right at that mark, and then on the corresponding piece, I'm going to poke up and kind of poke around until you get right on that mark. So the 2 marks are aligned through the fabrics. And we'll do the same with the other corner. So poke down through one and up through the other, right on that mark. And then take that pin and just poke it through again to hold your pieces in place. Just like that. So it looks a little funny right now. This is what it should look like. You don't want to line it up like this and so, because then you're going to end up with some kite shapes, and that's not what we want. So now I will do that with this set here. So I'm poking down through my red fabric and then up through my background, right where those 2 lines meet. Then I'll use the pins to hold the fabric in place. So these should look opposite of each other. And now we're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on either side of the line. And when I say scant 1/4 inch, I mean just like a thread's width skinnier than a 1/4 inch. You just want to make sure you have enough to trim. So if you sew a regular 1/4 inch, it should be fine. Just don't do a fat 1/4 inch. If anything, go a little on the skinny side. And now that those are sewn, we just cut on that line and press them open. And because they're offset like this, when you open it up, it's going to create a rectangle. All right, got those pressed, and now we need to trim these down to size. So I'll start with this set. This is our left-facing set because the upper corner is left. So we'll take our template here, and we're just going to align that L line along the seam. And you can position it to make sure that you'll be trimming off fabric on all sides. Trim along the side and the top. So I'm going to flip it around, line that L line back up on the seam along with the raw edges here, and trim. Now, if you don't have my HRT trim template, I do have some free downloads on my website of some paper templates that you can tape to the back side of your regular ruler to help you with this. And now we'll just trim the rest of them. And then these are the R, so we're going to line up that R line instead of the L, because they are going the opposite direction. All right, those are all trimmed up. Next, we're going to take the J background square and the D4 square and create some half square triangles. So just like we did on the half square triangles with Doom, we'll put those right sides together, draw a line from corner to corner, and then sew a 1/4 inch on either side. Then we're going to trim these down to size, just like we did with the larger half square triangles. And now that all the elements are sewn, we can assemble the eyes. So we'll start with our 2 large pieces here, and then we need 1 of each half rectangle triangle. The other 2 are spare, so we'll set those aside. Then we'll place those on the inner corners so that the angles are going down towards each other. And then the half square triangles go on the outside edges. So we'll start by sewing these units together. And now we can sew those to the bottoms. And now that those are assembled, we'll add D6 in between them. All right, Doom's all ready to go, so let's move on to Fear. All right, for the Fear block, out of the background, we are going to need 2 piece A, 6 piece F, and 2 piece N. And then from our yellow, we're going to have 2 F2, 2 F3, 1 F6, and 4 F9. So we're going to start with 2 of the background F pieces and 2 of the F3 yellow pieces. We are going to snowball opposite corners on these. On the yellow, we're going to snowball it with background. We're going to do it on the 2 outer corners here. And then on the background, we're going to use yellow squares, again, on the 2 outside corners. Now we can trim our seams to 1/4 inch and press them open. Here we go. So we'll set those aside. And now we need to make some half rectangle triangles, just like we did with Doom. So we'll start by making those marks, 1/2 inch in from the side and the top and bottom. So on one set we have the upper right and lower left, and then the other set the lower right and the upper left. I marked these wrong, you can ignore those. And now on one of the pieces for each set, we'll connect those 2 marks. And then use a pin to help us get those aligned. Now we'll go sew that scant 1/4 inch on either side. And now we can trim on that line and press our seams. Then we'll use our template to trim those to size. All right, so earlier when I had you do 2 of the background with the yellow snowball corner, you actually should have done 2 of each direction. And with that, all of our elements are made, so let's put the eyes together. All right, we're going to begin in the center by sewing these 2 pieces together. Then we'll sew these to the top and bottom. Now we'll sew these 2 side pieces together. And now we can attach those. There's our finished eyes, so we can add our F6 to the center. And there's our eyes for Fear. And now on to Happy, which is our last emotion. And then for the happy eyes, from background, you'll need 2 R rectangles. And then from our green, we have 1 H6, 4 H8, and 4 H9. This is probably the easiest emotion to make. So on both of our R pieces, we are going to begin by snowballing the corners. On the outside edges along one of the long sides, we will put the 2 H8 pieces. And then on the inside corners, opposite those, we are going to do the smaller H9 squares. And then we'll just sew from corner to corner on each of those squares. And now we trim and press. And now we just need to add our H6 piece in the middle. And there's our eyes for happy. And with that, we are done with week 3. Now be sure that you're submitting your progress photos in the Google form that gets sent out in the weekly email. And if you're not getting the weekly email, be sure to head over to my website to sign up for that. At the end of our quilt-along, one lucky participant is going to get their quilt long-armed by me. Filling out the survey and submitting your photos every week is your entry to win. Even if you have not finished the step, still be sure to enter. And next week, we're going to finish up these skulls. So until then, work on your eyes. If you still have some pieces left from last week, work on those as well. And I'll see you back here in a week.